And we're off and running on the Krueger Show. Hope everybody's having a great February 20th, 2024. Thanks for joining us. Brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check out Pig and a Pickle in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. We're also brought to you by Marin Auto Glass, marinautoglass.com, 415-883-3030, as well as Underdog Fantasy. And we have a couple of new sponsors this month. Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles. Call Anthony Catania. Heard from Anthony today. Said, Krug, man, ever since I started advertising on your show, my phone's ringing off the hook. So give him a call. He's at 831-521-5264. He runs a sports cards and collectibles store on 205 Cypress Avenue in Pacific Grove, California, along the Monterey Peninsula. So he said a bunch of people have called him in the last couple of weeks, and so we appreciate Anthony for sponsoring the show. And then valleyhillroofing.net. If you ever put a roof on a home, man, it's hard to find a good roofer, and if you do, it's almost like a good fishing hole. You want to tell everybody about it. Well, valleyhillroofing.net is a Go Green roofing contractor. They're phenomenal. Give them a call. They're at 209-481-6851. Usually people call roofers twice a year, Raj. They call them this time of the year when the roof's leaking. They usually come out and patch it, right, and then wait for the rain to stop. And then in the springtime, once we get to May 1st or something, it never rains again until November. And usually that's when people call the roofers as well. They try to do those deals in the summer. So valleyhillroofing.net, give them a call, 209-481-6851. They're a Go Green roofing contractor. And all those links, by the way, are listed in the description of the show. Raj from RSF 49ers in the house. We've been doing this all year. I'm really glad that we have Raj with us tonight. Raj, how are you, man?
I'm good, man. Honestly, though, I took a little break this weekend. There wasn't much to talk about. I needed a little, reset of the mind. But, man, this offseason, it's already killing. Like, I need this season to start. I had to go to Target. I was, finding things to do to keep myself busy. I spent a lot of money at Target with my daughter. I need football season back, man, but I'm doing good.
Man, you're like me, dude. You're a grinder, and I don't know if people know that about Raj, but Raj works hard, man. You've got your physical therapy going on that you're doing, concurrently with your channel. You're huge on YouTube. You're big as heck on Instagram, and you're a grinder. And I just appreciate people like yourself who put in the work and really grind. But, dude, when you're like me and you, Raj, and we grind, and we grind, and we grind, I really kind of felt really burnt out. Like Sunday night, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I mean, I was burnt all week. Just kind of, it was a weird feeling. It was just kind of like, and I thought about it. My wife's asking me about it. I'm like, honey, I feel different because it's like, we grinded, and I don't know if you were quite like me, but I grinded from when John Lynch came out at the Combine and said, you know what, Trey Lance has got to play, but we got a team that's ready to win right now. And it was so clear to me that they were going to trade Trey Lance, which was a monumental story. And I was all over that in February, and then just got blitzed by the audience in February and March, April, because I predicted it would happen by the draft, and the draft came and went. It didn't happen. May, June, July. He was finally traded in August, and there were indications that that was coming, as we got closer to August. But it just made this season, Raj, turn into a full calendar year. Because here we are again. We're 1 week away, basically, from the Combine. And that's how much I grinded the Niner talk on my channel. And you know it because I had you on almost every week throughout that. Mm-hmm. But, man, we grinded. And we grinded more in February and March and April and May and June, those 5 months before camp, than I ever did in any other season. because of this Trey Lance story and what I believe Lynch was telling us, and the Niners were kind of not really saying it, but we were getting indications, and then there was Darnold, and then all of a sudden there was Brandon Allen. You know what I'm saying? So we got like indications. Jabus in here says Larry always got to flex his winning takes. No, it's not even that. It's not even that. I know I'm right a lot of the time, and I'm not afraid to say so. But when I'm wrong, I'll say I'm wrong. But it's not even about those takes. It's not even trying to say I got that right. Everybody knows I got that right. It's more about we turned a 6-month season into a 12-month season.
It was a long season, Larry.
It was a long season.
And I always try to stay busy during the off-season content-wise, always posting on social media and stuff. But this year, you're right. It took a toll out of me. Like, I just remember last week being like, what a season. And then, like I said, this weekend, I just needed to take a break, man. It was like every day, something. They get deep into the playoffs, Super Bowl. You need a little reset, but at the same time, I'm empty. Like, I'm at work, and it was like, man, you're like really working. You never work like this, Raj. They're like, man, yeah, we forgot how good of a therapist you are. They kind of joke now at work. They're like, you're really good. I was like, yeah, when I'm here and I'm doing it, there's nothing to post, man. So I've been back to work, like being in the thick of it. In a couple of months, I said, don't worry, give me a couple months. I'll be back to being slacking off here and doing my other stuff. But man, it was a wild season.
You got out to Vegas. I got out to Vegas. We unfortunately didn't get to party together in Vegas. How was your week in Vegas leading up to the bowl?
It was phenomenal, man. I did a lot of like promos, did the stuff. I sponsored. Please.
Are you plugged in right now, Daraj? I'm getting you on a like you're. Well, it was like you were kind of hitting and missing there. I don't know. Maybe I was the only one getting that.
I'm back, but so yeah, the week was great. We did we hosted me and a couple other big 49er people that do like the tailgates and stuff. We actually hosted a huge like pregame party at the Hard Rock the day before the Super Bowl. That was a pretty successful venture with Gold Bar Whiskey and a couple other sponsors, and just the whole week was great, and enjoyed Vegas. I'm from Vegas, so I enjoyed it. I actually ended up going to a lot of different events, and it was good, but leaving with a broken heart was not great. But hey, we got another off season to figure out what do we need to do to get back to that, Larry, and that's what I need to ask you. What do we got to do to get back to New Orleans next year, and this time come away as the champions instead of the chumps?
It's great. You're leading right into our topic. I titled this stream "The Big Decisions the 49ers Need to Make," and this. Why don't we start with Brandon Aiyuk?
Let's do it.
Because I think Aiyuk's kind of interesting. I'm going to share the screen. This was Willard and Dibbs on 95.7 The Game today with Bucky Brooks, and you know Bucky, and Bucky's really solid. Went to North Carolina, great guy. Here's
right. I think you said.
Here is Bucky Brooks with Willard and Dibbs talking a little bit of Aiyuk, and then we'll comment on it. Here it is.
$50 million into these two players based on the skill set that they've shown, at least so far. So if that's the case, what would you do?
Well, I don't know if you have to do anything right now with Brandon Aiyuk. Like, I know there's a rush, but, like, he still has the fifth-year option to play on, right? I think he still has the fifth-year option before he's not free. So what you do is you make him play on the option, and then eventually you figure it out. Because let's be honest, after next year, they're going to have to reset the entire program. Because after next year, they're going to have to pay the quarterback if the quarterback continues to play like that. So once you pay the quarterback, you can't pay everybody else. And so that's the time where you have to reset the entire team.
Yeah, but Bucky, he's not showing up without a new deal.
Okay, you know what happens?
Yeah, I know.
This is why. Because, Mark, you're so nice. But guess what? The CBA has things in it where if he doesn't show up, it would be very punitive to his pocketbook.
I understand.
So we can sit here and act like that, and we can play tough like, no, we got to pay him or he won't show up. If you're not in a situation where you can pay everybody, you just have to hold off and you got to wait and see. Because you're going to have to make a determination. It's going to be Debo or Brandon Aiyuk. Because when you pay the quarterback, because Brock is not going to pay for less than $1 million in his fourth year. You're going to have to pay him. And so when he gets up into that $40, $50 million range, somebody has to suffer. So I don't know if I could pay him right now because you still got others, unless you're going to cut Eric Armstead, reduce his number down. So then you have Brandon Aiyuk. So all of that stuff plays with it.
All right, a little bit of Bucky Brooks talking Brandon Aiyuk, and Peter King was on later in the day, and basically, also commented on Aiyuk, and he said, the 49ers, he kind of said what Bucky said, which is that the Niners have time to make a decision, and that they're going to have to make their major decisions as far as their roster really next offseason. They could kick the can down the road this offseason and kind of float everything into next year and just try to run it back. The question is Aiyuk willing to put off his big payday? Willard referenced there that he could hold out. And Bucky shot back with, if he holds out, he'll be fine, and eventually he'll come in and play. So Bucky said, I wouldn't trade Aiyuk. It's very difficult to have two high-priced wide receivers. If the Niners pay Aiyuk what I think he's worth, they're going to have $50 million in wide receivers. Bucky also pointed out in this interview that the Niner wide receivers really struggled to get open versus press man coverage against Kansas City, against L'Jarius Sneed and Trent McDuffie. And he said that neither Aiyuk nor Debo are polished route runners, and that the Niners, they don't win against elite corners. Debo gets number one wide receiver money right now. And Aiyuk, definitely, you could push it to next year, but he's probably going to get number one wide receiver money. Why don't we start right there? If you're the 49ers, and then there's other people suggesting that maybe they trade Aiyuk or trade Debo. The question is, obviously, I think everybody would rather, if it comes down to Aiyuk or Debo, I think most people would rather have Aiyuk than Debo. But Aiyuk is going to fetch a lot more in a trade market situation, maybe a first-round pick, maybe multiple picks, including a first-rounder, compared to Debo, who already makes $28 million, has had a bunch of injuries, and probably nets you a third, a fourth, or a fifth-round pick in return. What do you think, Raj? Why don't we start right there? The big decisions the Niners need to make. We'll start with Brandon Aiyuk. What are you going to do?
Yeah, that's off-season priority number one, the player that everybody's talking about. He's already kind of using the tactics that we thought he would eventually a couple days after the Super Bowl. I kind of thought that was crazy. His girl's out there talking, his friend on IG's talking, like, this is the stuff Debo did. He learned from Debo. I expect him to take the same route, scrub the social media, all that stuff. Like, I'm not worried about all that stuff. I know it's going to happen, but that's just, negotiations. Wide receivers, that's how they negotiate in the market. I saw on Sport Track, they're expecting him to make $23 million a year at least. That's probably what he's looking to fetch, and that's the wide receiver market. Now, can they pay him this year and figure it out? I think they can. I think that's what he wants. I think he wants to get paid now rather than later. I think Bucky made a good point in saying, hey, he probably will hold out if he doesn't get a big payday. He's a big time part of this offense. $14 million for his fifth-year option. I think he wants more, so I could see him holding out, whatever the case is. That gets a little tricky, I hope it doesn't get messy because he may suffer in terms of his ability to play on the field. We've seen it with Bosa, Debo, Warner, where they kind of fell off a little bit in the beginning, and then it took them some time to get back, if you don't train. So that's something the 49ers have to kind of look at, but they've been doing this for years. They kind of hold off, wait till training camp, and it's the Niner way. So there's that situation. And he did mention, will they carry two receivers for $50 million? Debo's at $28 million. Will they restructure and extend him and then, save some money? Will they restructure Arik Armstead? There's so many guys that they could restructure. Right now, I think they have the leeway to, make this contract work because you mentioned they don't have Brock Purdy on a big contract, but they will eventually, especially if he plays the way he did this year. So they got a lot of questions, man. And I think part of it is who else is going to be a casualty. It's not just Aiyuk. Like, they might have to get rid of someone to keep Aiyuk. I think there's got to be a casualty made, to keep Aiyuk. And, this kind of reminds me of the Armstead, DeForest Buckner situation. They had two highly touted guys on their team. He wanted to keep them both. They're big parts of the defense. And they had to make a decision. And the decision was you treat Defoe because he's a higher trade value. So if you're looking at, Debo, Aiyuk, like you said, it makes more sense to trade Brandon Aiyuk because he could probably get you a first, maybe multiple. A couple years back when Debo was going for his extension, you could have traded him for a first, but now you're not going to get much out of him. But I know a lot of people say trade Debo, trade Debo. And Debo is really important to this offense. And Kyle loves Debo. I don't care what you like. I don't care what I like. I don't care what Joe down the street likes. It's up to Kyle. This is his offense. And during the Super Bowl, Debo Samuel had more targets. If you look at the season, I know Debo missed some games. He had 12 touchdowns compared to Brandon Aiyuk. He had 1,100, over 1,100 yards total yards of scrimmage. Brandon Aiyuk had 13. He had a very great season, over 1,300 yards receiving, 31st in total targets, 7th in total receptions. So his efficiency is outstanding. He's great. And that is what Ayuk's going to probably tell Kyle and the guys when he's negotiating, say, hey, look, you put me on any other team, I'm their number one target. I'll probably have Justin Jefferson numbers. So Aiyuk does have a lot to argue. But then again, there's a lot of weapons on the 49ers. So I can see this going either way, Larry. I can see the people that say that they're going to trade him being true because they did it with Defoe. I could see people saying, don't worry, they're going to get it taken care of because they've done it before. But this is an interesting one this year because they are kind of in this weird position where they need to keep the core of this team to get back to the Super Bowl next year. And Ayuk's very important because you can't just replace Brandon Aiyuk with any rookie. I know there's some good rookies out there, but you said that, their routes they're not the most polished route runners. Maybe Debo's not the most polished route runner. I think Brandon Aiyuk is he's probably one of the best route runners in the league. That's what a lot of people say. Now, the problem was in the Super Bowl, he was locked up by some great corners. I think the offensive line was an issue that didn't allow him to, develop his routes fully. So with that being said, yes, Brandon Aiyuk is a major priority. They need to fix the offensive line so they can utilize Aiyuk. And I think the final thing I want to say is when Aiyuk goes into his negotiations, I think he needs to tell Kyle, like, look, I want the ball. I don't care if Debo is your guy because I think that's the one issue between Aiyuk and Debo. Debo's vocal. We've heard so many times where he says, give me the ball, give me the damn ball, give me the damn ball. How many times have you heard that? I don't think I've ever heard Aiyuk say, give me the ball during the game. I don't know if you have interviewed him, but do you feel like he commands that? He needs to be an alpha.
Part of the reason I think he blends in so well is that he doesn't demand the ball. He's a workman-like, put your head down kind of guy. He blocks in the run game, and he's really dependable. I think this is going to be very difficult for the 49ers to extend him. I mean, just look around the NFL and look at what's going on with wide receivers in this league. Devontae Adams wanted a deal. He got dealt. Tyreek Hill wanted a new deal. He got dealt. A.J. Brown wanted a new deal. Guess what happened to A.J. Brown? He got dealt, And the wide receiver, Barnwell or Graziano or one of these guys on ESPN today kind of highlighted, or maybe it was yesterday, that the wide receiver extension market has not really moved a whole lot. It's been tough for teams to find common ground with wide receivers. Minnesota has yet to sign Justin Jefferson long-term. Dallas hasn't signed CeeDee Lamb long-term. Pittman Jr. is not signed long-term. T. Higgins is now testing the free agent market. And so it's difficult to project what an extension may look like for Aiyuk unless the Niners are willing to kind of blow him out of the water with a dramatic overpay. That's not Parag's way. So I think the Niners may want to wait and see this market to define itself a little bit more so they know what they're dealing with. But at the same time, doing an Aiyuk extension right now could actually help the Niners. Right? I mean, he's making $14.1 million this year in his fifth-year option. That also happens to be his cap number. And if they extend him, they might be able to have him on the books for like $4 million this year, and free up $10 million. So it's kind of a matter of how do they choose to go about this. And then you get the feeling because of the rhetoric coming out of the Aiyuk camp with his siblings and some of the stuff that's been put out there that he is not going to be in a good mental state if they ask him to come back next year and play on the fifth-year extension, on the fifth-year option at 14.1. I mean, he'll make his 14.1 million, but I don't, and Peter King makes the great point that most great wide receivers get one major payday. So he's waiting on his major payday. Peter also mentioned that, look at Kansas City. They traded Tyreek Hill to Miami, And what did they do afterwards? They won the last 2 Super Bowls, and they haven't had a 1,000-yard receiver in either of the last 2 seasons, and it hasn't hurt them. They found a way to win the Super Bowl without Tyreek Hill. And now they do have Mahomes and Andy Reid and some other great players for sure. But so, I mean, what how do you play your hand if you're the Niners here? You pay this guy and hope that whatever you give him is basically market value in a market that's kind of undefined? Do you make him wait for another year and say, hey, look, next year's the year we're going to pay Brock. Next year's the year we're really going to have to take a hard look at our team across the board. Let's try to run it back this year. We'll pay you the 14.1 and we'll do it next year. What do you think how do you think they're going to play their hand?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think part of that whole situation has to deal with Brock Purdy. And I feel like his continued growth relies on a guy like Aiyuk because they have that great, chemistry. Brandon Aiyuk's the younger receiver of the group between him and Debo and everybody. I mean, Debo's a great veteran, but he's not going to be there after 2020. Like his contract's kind of airing up, cleaning up. He signed a 3-year extension because his hope was he can get another big extension after the 3 years. And, the injuries have hurt him, but in Kyle's offense, he's very vital. I know he couldn't separate in the Super Bowl and he was kind of clamped up, but Kyle loves Debo. They don't win without Debo. So I think Brandon Aiyuk, again, he has to be vocal. And I think there's going to be rumors. There's going to be reports in the next couple of weeks or whatever that Brandon Aiyuk, maybe it's Brandon or the team. You're going to hear some type of report, combines next week, of Brandon Aiyuk possibly trading, a trade rumor. I know it's going to happen. It's the offseason. It's going to happen. There's going to be reports, and they might look into it. They might look into what are the options we can get for Brandon Aiyuk, because you're right. If it doesn't make sense for them financially, they're going to have to figure out what can we get in return for Aiyuk. Is it fair enough, compensation wise? Because after this year, they're going to have to look you have to look at this team and say, okay, Brock Purdy's got to get paid. Who's going to stay? Who's going to go? How are we going to keep this team to keep them contending in the playoffs? And who knows if Trent Williams is going to be there, George Kittle, and all these guys are getting older. So I'm sure they're going to explore that option. And I know the report yesterday from ESPN was, I think the report said, I can't remember, it was the ESPN guy, and he basically said the most likely outcome, the prediction he had was 49ers might trade Brandon Aiyuk for those reasons. So I'm sure they're going to explore. I think ultimately the 49ers figure out a way to pay him and make it work in the books. But I think it's going to have to deal with, extending players and renegotiating contracts. Armstead, if they can extend, Mooney Ward, that probably opens up some cap space. Hufanga and Greenlaw, although he probably would have got extended if he was healthy, that becomes a little tricky. So I think it really depends on the guys they want to stick around, guys that are willing to take pay cuts. Maybe Trent Williams takes another, upfront guarantee money bonus like he did last year, open up some cap space. I'm sure there's ways they can open up that money, but they have to really determine if Brandon Aiyuk's the guy they want to build this team around, because after this year, Debo is probably gone in a year or two, right? So do they feel that Aiyuk is the leader of this clubhouse in terms of wide receiver? And that's what Kyle has to find out. Ultimately, Larry, I think they do figure it out, but I think it's going to be long, drawn-out saga like it always is. And I hate that because it's just the way the 49ers operate. Parag and everybody, they push things down to the end. They kick the can, like you said, and then we're sitting here with the most dramatic offseason.
Well, and then Peter made a great point today. He said Kansas City led the NFL this year in unblocked blitzers, and somehow Spagnuolo found a way in Super Bowl 58 to get 9 unblocked runs at Brock Purdy in this game. And Peter's assessment of the Niners was just, hey, man, they better do something to improve the right side of their offensive line. And I scoured the free agent list this week, looking at the offensive linemen, and there's guards, but there's no tackles. I mean, there's Tyron Smith from Dallas, but I don't think you're going to get him. Other than that, it's not a good tackle market in free agency. Usually, you're going to have to draft a tackle. So then it comes down to, the 49ers pick 31. It's a good tackle draft. The Tankathon I'm looking at right now has Jordan Morgan from Arizona, 6'6", 320-pound offensive tackle, going to the Niners at 31. And they have Graham Barton still on the board, Kingsley Sumatea from BYU still on the board. Definitely some decent tackles there. Patrick Paul. I know Brad is a big Patrick Paul guy from Houston. And there's a few others. I like, Jalen or Javon Foster from Missouri. He's probably a later round guy. Christian Jones, I believe, from Texas. He's a later round guy. Ladarius Henderson from Michigan. He's probably a second or third round pick. But usually the best tackles come off the board early.
Top 10.
I mean, do you dare? Do the Niners dare try the DeForest Buckner, Javon Kinlaw move here? What would you want for Aiyuk? I mean, in that when I'm referencing that, of course, that was the Niners had Jimmy Ward and Eric Armstead and DeForest Buckner. They were all free agents after they went to the Super Bowl in Super Bowl 54, and they decided to keep Jimmy Ward and Eric Armstead and trade DeForest Buckner. And because Buckner was such a stud, they got a first round pick and they turned that pick into Javon Kinlaw. Do the Niners do that? Do they try? I mean, there's talk that the New York Giants badly want, Brandon Aiyuk. If they have the 6th pick in the draft. Would you take, if you could move Aiyuk in a future pick or a later pick for the 6th pick, would you take Malik Neighbors and be happy with the trade-off of Malik Neighbors on a rookie deal for Brandon Aiyuk on his major, non-rookie deal? They'd save a lot of money. They may even add some speed there. Neighbors had 89 catches and 14 touchdowns this year. Or supposedly the Raiders have a lot of interest. They pick 13. If you got the 13th pick, maybe you might be able to get the 13th pick in Michael Mayer or something like that from the Raiders. You might be able to draft Taliesin Fuaga or J.C. Latham. Latham is a blue chip right tackle. I mean, he's a plug and play, 6'6", 335 pounds. He would be your right tackle for the next decade if you got Latham. And Fuaga's 6'6", 325. He's tough as nails. Great, brawler, mauler in the run game. What do you think? Would you move Aiyuk to the Raiders for a tackle or to the Giants for a top 10 pick and go for a Malik Neighbors? What do you think?
If they want to replace him with the receiver, Neighbors is the best way to go. But I don't know if you're going to get that 6th pick. You're probably going to have to throw something else in the mix.
Right.
I would go with the tackle if it's up to me, because we said how much they miss the tackle. But then you have to replace Aiyuk somehow. That's the thing, and that's what they do.
Rice's kid is in this draft. I really love Rice's kid,
but he's not.
He's not Aiyuk. He's not Aiyuk.
This is the thing with Aiyuk. He's so good for the system because yes, he's great after the catch. He's a yak guy. He's route per yards per route run. He's like top 3 in the NFL. He's the number 1 graded pass blocking receiver. Like, he does so many things for Kyle's system. Like, we sat here and I said how good Debo is for the system, but don't get it twisted. Brandon Aiyuk's just as good as Debo in this city. He understands the system. Took him a couple years to kind of get it, but now he's, just amazing. And to Brandon's credit, I remember last year he tweeted out, he goes, look, 4th option, 1,000 yards receiving. When he had his first 1,000 yards receiving, like, he was like, oh my God. And now 4th option again, and he had a career year. Like, every year he gets better. So he knows his worth. And I think that's where the families come in, where Aiyuk's probably coming from, where his frustrations are. Yeah, he probably should have got the ball more in the Super Bowl, but at the same time, was he getting open, just like you said? And they said, a lot of people have said, he just didn't get separation. I think it comes down to what I said earlier is they didn't have time to let him separate. So it comes down to if they're going to trade him, Larry, and I hope they don't. I'm making this very clear. I don't want him to trade Aiyuk.
Right.
You can't replace him. But with a rookie, maybe in a couple years. If you're going to trade him, you need to get a quality right tackle, because you're not going to get a great right tackle at 31. You'll get a good one. But if you want a top tackle in this draft, like you said, has to be a top 10, maybe 15 pick in the draft to get a quality elite. Boom, right now start. He is going to be a quality 10-year vet on your team. You get the tackle. But then you still have to replace Brandon Aiyuk somehow. And I don't think they have that in their room. I know Jennings, they could probably bring, but he's not Brandon Aiyuk. Ronnie Bell, he's not Brandon Aiyuk. Danny Gray, he's probably going to get cut this season. So you're going to take a bump with the tackle. You're going to improve your O-line, but then your offense takes a bump unless, somebody can figure out how to become a stud on this team. Because Brandon Aiyuk, that's 1,300 yards. That's not something you throw away. That's a lot of production.
Yeah, no question. Nick Anderson says, "Crew, can you turn up Raj a little?" It's my mic is a little hot, so I turned my mic down a little bit to try to get us closer. I apologize. Since I came back from the Super Bowl, my setup's a little screwy. So I'm sorry for those of you. We'll try to make the audio a little better. But no, I'm with you on Aiyuk. I mean, I'm not in a rush to trade him either. But there are a lot of good wide receivers. I mean, I'll tell you the receiver that's super exciting to me in this draft is the LSU kid, Brian. I mean, outside of Neighbors, I love Neighbors, but Brian Thomas, the other LSU kid, 6'4", 205. He caught 68 balls. He had 17 touchdowns this year. He's monster. I mean, he's just absolutely awesome. But he's projected to go 28, so there's no even guarantee that if you traded Aiyuk for a mid-first round pick and went with the tackle, that Thomas would even fall to you at 31. You may have to trade up to get him. But he's the guy I'd want. I'm not as excited about Keon Coleman from Florida State or Troy Franklin from Oregon or Adonai Mitchell from Texas or, really that next group, Lad McConkey and those guys. They're not, to me, they're not, Xavier Worthy from Texas. I do like Xavier Legette from South Carolina, and they're saying he may go 56. So that's down the board. So maybe you could get a guy like Xavier Legette, maybe even trade back from 31 and make that happen. But to me, the only way I would be interested in moving Aiyuk is if I really felt like I could, the bottom line is the Niners got to find a big-time offensive tackle. I mean, there's no more, they can't do this game anymore of stopgap. The 49ers this year, Raj, and I saw this stat today, they were 20th in the NFL in pass block win rate, 55.6%. That's just too low. Way too low. If you're going to have Brock Purdy and he's going to have success, I agree with you. Aiyuk probably would have had a bigger Super Bowl if they could have just protected. I really think that the pass that where Chris Jones rolled in and he threw incomplete to Jawan Jennings, he probably would have flipped his eyes to the left side of the formation, saw that Aiyuk had left Snead in the dust, and then Snead had gone to the turf, and it would have been the easiest pitch and catch touchdown of all time, and it probably would have vaulted the Niners to a Super Bowl win. And instead, the ball came out and had to come out fast because of their blitzer and because the O-line broke down, and there you go. And we know how it all ended. But 20th in pass block win rate. I mean, Green Bay was second in pass block win rate. 49ers were 20th. So, I mean, and they've got to commit at some point. You've got to commit to that offensive line. Man, I really don't want to trade Aiyuk, but if I could get the Raiders' 13th pick, and I don't know that you could get Mayer as well, who knows, probably not, but let's say you could get the 13th pick, and you could get a blue chipper like J.C. Latham, my goodness, I mean, you're talking about like a Trent Williams type guy on the right side. I mean, just a house. And then if you could somehow come back at the end of the first round and get Brian Thomas Jr. at LSU, and now I think you'd be ahead of the game and you would have saved some money. But there's a lot of ifs there. And I'm having a real difficult time crossing that bridge of moving Brandon Aiyuk. All right, let's get into the second one. The second one is defensive coordinator. Tim Kawakami tweeted out today that he thinks it's going to happen soon. And he put out some names on one of the podcasts. And, I've been throwing Belichick's name out there, and a lot of people, Peter King talked about this today with Willard and Dibbs on 95.7 The Game, and just basically said that, he had some source that he talked to a couple weeks back who said that Bill Belichick really doesn't want to be a defensive coordinator. But that was a few weeks ago. And, you're talking about a guy who doesn't have any real options. He's coached every year in the NFL since 1975. He's 72. He will not coach in the NFL this year because he's not going to be a head coach. The 49ers' job, I think, as the defensive coordinator, is easily the best job he can have, football-wise. He's not going to college. And I understand it's a long shot. It's Bill Belichick. He's a Hall of Fame head coach. Why would he ever be a coordinator? I get it. Believe me, I understand the people who push back on me and like, Krug, stop. It's not going to happen. No, I understand. It's kind of it seems like a pipe dream. But you also got to remember this. Kyle Shanahan's on the record has in the past, and I was in the room when he said it, as saying, hey, I could have a good defensive coordinator, but if Bill Belichick were available, I'd be stupid not to hire him. So he's on the record as saying that. And he dumps Steve Wilkes, who had a pretty good Super Bowl, and the Niners were top 10 in total defense, top 5 in points allowed per game. And he fires Steve Wilkes, and he knows Belichick's out there. And he knows Belichick is not going to be a head coach because all those jobs were finalized before the Super Bowl. To me, that reeks of he's going to make a play for Bill Belichick. Now, it was interesting listening to Peter King today. He said, I would not be this is a quote from Peter King. I would not be shocked at all if Kyle picked up the phone and offered the gig to Belichick or Pete Carroll. So that's interesting. One, that this is the best job that Belichick could have. He's not going to yuck it up on TV with Clarissa Thompson and Dick Sherman. I mean, it's just not happening. He's just not doing that. He's not going on TV and being all glib and smiley. That's not happening. And he's not going to be a head coach. So the only thing left is to be a defensive coordinator for like an awesome team that's on the verge of a Super Bowl. And Peter King said it. He said, it would be an incredible story if Bill Belichick got the Niners over the top. He thinks it would directly result in him landing a top-tier NFL head coaching job. So there's a lot there. And then, other names out there. I mean, there's Jeff Ulbrich for the Jets. He's an ex-Niner. There's Chris Kiffin, who was a coordinator before and, helped the Niners bring them Azeez Al-Shaair from college, and Azeez is a free agent, and they probably would love to have Azeez back, replacing Greenlaw, who may not play this year. So I think Chris Kiffin and Jeff Ulbrich are really interesting names. What do you think, Raj? And then the other one, and this was today, I didn't catch this today, but Pete Carroll, 72. Mm-hmm. And on the Rich Eisen show, I guess this was last week, Greg Papa suggested that Carroll could be a strong fit for the DC position. He knows this defense. This is his defense. Here's the quote from Greg. He says, I think Pete Carroll would be a more of a natural fit because with Belichick, he likes to vary his fronts. It would be a very different defense. What's the best defense to run for Fred, Dre, Nick, Charvarius, Demo, Hufanga, et cetera? That's who you're trying to serve. The defense that the 49ers are running since Kyle Shanahan has been the head coach is the Seattle defense. Carroll's the guy who did it. Carroll coached the Seahawks from 2010 to 2023. He's very familiar with the 49ers. I mean, there's a lot of talk that he was not happy with how it ended in Seattle. Niners run a 4-3 defense, very similar to the one that he implemented in Seattle. He's a Marin guy, went to Redwood High School, coached with the Niners in the mid-'90s, then left to become the head coach of the Pats. What do you think? Defensive coordinator was Pete Carroll, Bill Belichick, Chris Kiffin, Jeff Ulbrich. Is there a name that Mike Vrabel is a name out there if he doesn't physically intimidate Shanahan? What do you
I'll need that.
That's a crazy story. What do you think though, Raj?
Matt, before we started this, you told me a little bit about that Belichick, and now listening to you, man, I want it. I want Belichick, man. Give me Belichick. Man, like, he really has nothing left to prove. It's not like, oh, Belichick's going to be this hot shot coach, and then if he does good as a defensive coordinator, he can get – it's Bill Belichick. If he wanted a job, he can get a job. Like, he just didn't want the jobs that were available, and those teams went different routes. Belichick probably maybe wanted more power or whatever. I don't know. Who knows? If Belichick wants to coach, this is probably the best job. This is the best job out there. I mean, a championship caliber team, you go out there, you help Kyle get this championship. I mean, you get a championship again because it's been a little bit since Belichick's, been at that level, ever since Brady left. And you know what? People are questioning Belichick. Like, he's not a good coach. He can't win it all. Why don't you go with Kyle? go run it up and tell everybody, F you, guess what? Me and Kyle just won a championship. I think it'd be great. Again, he's a great defensive guy. He could come in here and just clean it up a little bit and help Kyle get over the hump. And you know what? Kyle would be grateful. A couple years back in the combine when they were looking for quarterbacks in the pro days, him and Belly were there. You know, Mac Jones, Trey Lance looking at the court. I'm sure they're close, you know, a little bit. So give me Belichick. He's the top guy. I think obviously he's the top guy. But a couple other names that you threw out there, I wouldn't mind Pete Carroll, man. He knows the system, former 49ers defensive coordinator. He's been in the 49ers coaching system. Why don't you walk back in? You know, it'd be nice. Go pull up those old 49er threads, throw it back on. I mean, Pete probably wants to get back at Seattle, right? I heard a lot of bad stuff too, and you know they let go of him as coach. So why don't you stick it to him twice a year, you know, and help Kyle Shanahan win that NFC West and run it to the Super Bowl. So I would love Pete Carroll, man. That guy knows the system, right? Pete Carroll and Fred Warner. Are you kidding me? He coached Bobby Wagner, and now he could coach Fred Warner. Two generational linebackers would be great. With this secondary, Pete Carroll, man, I think he could elevate them to the top. The guy that you didn't really mention much, but you threw him at the end, Mike Vrabel. I mean, he's a heck of a coach. If you can't get Belichick, he's the next best thing. He's Belichick's defensive disciple. So I think that'd be great. And I think also with Vrabel, you know, failing as a coach a little bit over the last 2 years, this would get him back into the national scene. If he wins the Super Bowl with Kyle, like, boom, he goes right back up to the top of the line as a big-time head coach. So those are my favorite choices. A couple guys we didn't mention. I mean, Rex Ryan, if he wants to come out of the booth.
Yeah.
I like Rex. I like sexy Rexy. Belichick, I don't see him as an analyst, so I kind of agree with you on that. Like, maybe.
Well, here I'm thinking about it from Kyle's perspective. What do you think Kyle wants? I don't think Kyle wants to spend any time on the defense.
No.
I don't. That's why Carroll and Belichick make so much sense, because I think almost kind of a prerequisite of offering either one of those guys the job is stay the hell out of my meeting room. Stay off my headset. Stay out of my meeting room. Don't interfere. Let me be the head coach of the defense.
Yeah.
And the other thing I kind of think like the Niners need, and they, you know, I'm sure if I brought this up, Kyle would bristle, Lynch would bristle. They don't like this dialogue at all, and they don't want to hear it, and I understand it. But I think Kyle wears too many hats, and I think he could really benefit from having that awesome, not, you know, Brian Hampton from the, you know, analytics staff sitting upstairs on the headsets. I'm not saying that Brian Hampton is not valuable. I'm sure Brian Hampton's very smart, but I mean, I've seen him in the press box. He's a young fella, man. He's a young guy. Are you telling me that when everything's on the line, he's going to stand up to Kyle Shanahan? I don't buy that.
No.
I think I think if you had a Belichick or a Carroll, and I think managing the game, even if it was just a, hey, Kyle, what about this? Hey, Kyle, what about that? Even if it was just having those guys who have been through those wars so many times right there, kind of like the way Harbaugh had Brad Seeley.
Yeah.
You know, if he had a Belichick or a Carroll right there, and he could just be like, you know, what do you think? Should we use should we challenge this? Should we not? Should we call a timeout here? Should we not? You know, just the little game management things.
Guidance out there. I agree, because I said it last week. I said maybe he needs an OC, but I like the thought of another like established coach to say, hey, Kyle, let's run a check through when you're on a big time situation in the game. Maybe Belichick say, might not be the right time for this, Kyle. And Kyle could say, you think so? Yeah, I'm Belichick, and I'm telling you, like, something like that could be good. I do think this defensive coordinator position needs to be a guy that's established. Like, I know there's a lot of people that are saying they can hire within. I don't mind those guys that they have, like Johnny Holland, a very respectful guy. But I think right now you need a guy that's going to command attention and just establish guy, because you're right. Kyle doesn't need to worry about the defense, and the defense coordinator needs to just go in there and handle the job, because Kyle's got a lot on his plate. Like you said, he's the head coach. He's the offense coordinator, although I think they should elevate Brian Greasy to that position to give him a little heads up. And then you're going to have to replace Clint Kubiak anyways. Why don't you replace Clint Kubiak? The guy you're going to get his replacement, just make him the QB coach and the passing game coordinator all in one. You can get Greasy as the offense coordinator, and then Pete Carroll, Vrabel, Belichick, whoever it is, as your DC. I think that would be a great situation, but that's what I would do if I was John Lynch.
One other thing to mention here is Steve Wilks. I don't know how much time you got around Steve Wilks, Raj. But I'm sure you saw many of his press conferences. You've seen him speak publicly. He's a man. You know what I mean? He's a guy who's been in the league for 25 years. He's a presence. You know what I mean? I don't know that you can just say, "Hey, we're going with this young kid, and he's our new guy," or somebody who's a first-year coordinator. I think you got a team that's ready to win right now. I think that when you hear the Niners name their defensive coordinator, and I've heard a lot of people say, it's going to be a no-name guy. I don't know that a no-name guy is what you need here, because Bosa, Warner, Armstead, Mooney, these guys have got to know that, part of them probably thinks, Wilks wasn't great. There's a lot of talk today from Peter King saying that maybe some of the players had some friction with Steve. But they've got to know that the guy that they're going to next is a clear upgrade from Steve. It can't be like, well, we're going with this guy and we'll have to wait and see. I don't know that that's going to work well in the room. I think as soon as they hear that name, I think they have to go, oh, yeah. That's why we got rid of Wilks, because we were going to get Pete Carroll. Or that's why we got rid of, because Bill, Vrabel, we're going to go get somebody who's like, the first second you hear that name, you're like, oh, yeah. That makes sense. RG says, Larry Krueger, the DC. Yeah. See, if they say, hey, look, the Krug show has blown up this year. He's taken it to 40,000 subs. Guys, he's a no-nonsense guy. Rough around the edges, but he'll call out, Chase Young for dogging it. I can't design anything. I can't play any games up front. My coverages won't work, but I'll call out the guys who dog. There you go. No, but I don't you think in some ways it has to be like a guy.
Yeah.
It can't just be like, well, we're hoping that this young, smart guy ascends to this position. Yeah, he's never done it before, but I don't think I think you're going to have to win over not just the fans. I think you're going to have to win over the guys in the room.
Absolutely.
I don't know. That's just my kind of feeling on it.
I agree. If it's just like a guy and not the guy, I think it's going to piss a lot of people off in the locker room and the fan base, because you're going to have to win everybody. And this is the thing. If you're on the cusp of winning you're literally on the cusp, and you just bring in a guy, like just some guy that you're like, oh, he has a good defensive mind, and we're trying to develop him. We don't have time for that, Larry. The window's closing. We need a guy. We need a guy that's going to come in, and Fred Warner's going to be like, oh, shit, that's the DC. Or Nick Bosa would be like, oh, that's my DC. Like, we need that kind of guy, somebody that's going to tell Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, like, yo, I got you. We are going to be a Super Bowl caliber defense. Not some guy that says, all right, guys, let's go over the new defensive strategies for the week. No, we don't need that guy. We need Bill Belichick, Pete Carroll, Mike Vrabel. We need one of those guys. I mean,
what about Brandon Staley?
I was just going to bring him up. There's probably another guy that Kyle might like, because he's from the similar system, Sean McVay, Rams. I don't want Brandon Staley. Like, I know he's a good
I don't either.
But his decision-making, the way he was in the Chargers, it tells me that he would be a horrible culture fit for this team. You imagine walking in, you get rid of Wilkes, who I think the players might have respected to an extent. There might have been some players that didn't. But you go and replace him with Brandon Staley, who just got fired, and he was a laughingstock in the league. I don't think it would go well for the fans, for the players. Don't give me Brandon Staley, please. The only Staley I want is Joe Staley.
Yeah, no, I'm. There's something about Brandon Staley that is there. I can't put my finger on it, but I just don't think he's going to command the room, especially coming off of the heels of Wilkes, who really had a real powerful presence. Yeah. And now you're going to put Brandon Staley in there, and I don't know. Joey Bosa. A lot of talk that Joey Bosa could get cut by the Chargers. Chargers are $48 million over the cap. Now, there's other, the whole that hasn't factored into what they're, holding over from 23. So the numbers will all change. But I think they've got the fourth worst cap figure going in at this point. And there's a lot of talk that they're going to cut Joey Bosa, maybe Khalil Mack, but Khalil Mack had 17 sacks. Joey Bosa's only played 14 games the last 2 years combined. He's only got 9 sacks over the last 2 years. But he is a bigger end. He is Nick's brother. He does have an unbelievable motor. They would like to play together. I'm sure. I'd rather have Joey Bosa than Chase Young or Randy Gregory. Nothing against those guys, but I'd rather have Joey Bosa. Now, I don't want to pay Joey Bosa what he was making. He's making $36 million this year, but I would like to have the Bosa brothers on my D-line. That's definitely something I feel strongly about. Peter King was asked about it today, and he said he thinks it's a good idea. He said, I've heard those rumblings as well, and I'm like kind of wondering, are you watching me on YouTube, Pete? Because I haven't heard too many people talking about it, but I've been talking about it. What do you think? Thumbs up, thumbs down on Joey Bosa?
That's a thumbs up. I know he's got the injury history, but I think for Nick Bosa's sake, he'd be hyped up to have his brother. Now, you're right. The money's the big issue. I think if he did come to the Niners, he would take a pay cut to play with his bro for a year or two. Now, the problem is, can he stay healthy? So that's the issue. And I think the Niners would take that in consideration. Say, hey, look, you want to come here, play with your brother, take a hometown discount because you need to prove that you stay healthy. So I think there'll be a lot of incentives, in the contract if they were to keep him. If you could play X amount of games, you get this much money. I would definitely like him more than Chase Young and Randy Gregory. No disrespect to them, but man, give me Nick Bosa. I think that would be the only silver lining if you get Brandon Staley. He could probably get Joey Bosa to come in to the
I don't know. Some people I talked to this week said that Joey Bosa doesn't like Brandon Staley.
Oh, don't do it. Do it then.
So maybe that would kill the Joey Bosa. Maybe that would piss off Nick Bosa. Could you imagine? Could you imagine if they hired a defensive coordinator that pissed off your best defensive player?
He tell Kyle, John, trade me.
Yeah.
Right now. Oh, my God.
Word has it that Bosa's unhappy. Staley, you're gone. We got this one. MF says, Larry, would you ask Bill Belichick some tough questions in the pressers? Oh, could you imagine him blowing me off? We're just looking to Cincinnati. We're looking ahead to Cincinnati.
Grant Cohn, Bill Belichick.
Oh, my God. That would be epic. Just having Grant question Belichick. Why didn't you blitz on third down? I didn't want to. Next. Bill, you went to a prevent at the end of the first half. Why? Because I decided it was going to help us win.
Yeah.
Yeah, over here. Next question. Just be awesome. Just the awesome amount, the back and forth. I think it would be so cool to have Belichick. It would be so cool.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
And I know there's lots of people. I've had people just ripping the shit out of me on Twitter for like the last 3. Because I brought it up to you a month ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. And I've been just getting crushed. But you know what? That's okay. I got broad shoulders. I can handle it. All right, let's hit some starred chats here. We got a bunch of them in the house. Gammon Brown is in the house. He says, Raj, what is it? TF, your stage name is the big decision?
Oh.
Well, I don't, what's TF?
Thank you for your stage name.
Thank you for your stage name.
Wow, appreciate you. Well, appreciate the support, Gammon. If the decision's up to me, I'm taking Bill Belichick.
There you go. Too Much Sauce says, do the 49ers need any changes at the tight end position? Well, they got to figure out if Cam Latu can catch a cold. I mean, that guy is balls just ricocheted off him this summer. I was like, this was a good tight end draft, too, and they took Cam Latu, and he's pretty athletic. Nice guy, too, but couldn't catch. Couldn't catch at all.
They took 2 tight ends.
And Braden Willis couldn't get on the field. If there was... that's the one thing. I would like to see Charlie Warner brought back, because I think Warner's kind of improving. Mm-hmm. I like his tenacious run blocking. I like Charlie Warner, so I think I'd bring him back. But I might be looking around at a tight end. I'm not in the camp that says trade George Kittle. I'm just not. I know other people are. I'm not. Ono Kai Kala Ono says the Penn State offensive tackle Fashanu for the first pick trade for Aiyuk. Yeah, you'd have to get in the top. That would be like if you traded him to the Giants and you got the 6th pick in the draft, maybe you could get Fashanu. He's another blue chipper, big Penn State offensive tackle. Really impressive for sure. Titus Moeller, Larry, you're getting my hopes up about Belichick. Well, I probably shouldn't, but there you go. I want to see it. 49er underscore throwback. How about Richard Sherman for DC? Richard Sherman, the one thing you don't do, it's like, you don't go from riding a tricycle to riding a 10-speed. There's training wheels and a smaller bike, and you don't go from I just played in the NFL to defensive coordinator.
He said it himself, yeah.
Yeah, he said it himself. I mean, you'd start with quality control, and if you were a really good defensive quality control guy, then they might move you for a guy like him, maybe cornerback coach since he played corner. Yeah. And then after he did that, maybe after 2 years, maybe he'd be like the DB coach. And after maybe a couple more years there, let's say it's year 5, and he's done a really good job at those 3 jobs, then you'd make him your coordinator. So he's kind of like in a 5-year thing before he would be considered. And he knows it. That's the beautiful thing about Richard Sherman. He's not like one of these guys like, no, hire me. No, he understands there's a pecking order and there's a process, and he'd have to go through it. I could see he's definitely smart enough. He's definitely verbal enough. He's definitely passionate enough. My only question is to many players who played, when you have millions of dollars in the bank, do you want to work 110 hours in a week? Like, I work hard, but I'm a lazy pile of crap compared to every 49er assistant coach. I just claim we started this stream by me telling you how hard Raj works. Raj and I are both just like, we're just like messing around compared to these coaches. These guys show up at 5 a.m. They're there till 5 p.m. every day, some days till midnight. Some days they sleep there. And it's a level of commitment that I don't think the average person really gets. Oh. So that's why you don't see a lot of players doing it. I mean, like, I think Alex Smith would be like the most incredible quarterback coach of all time. He's so smart. He's cerebral. He's really, really experienced. He's a verbal guy. He's a great guy. He would be an awesome quarterback coach, but he doesn't want to work that hard. He doesn't want to spend those hours. He's got a beautiful wife, kids, and all that thing. I mean, they're long hours. KR says, go ahead, Raj.
No, it's a grind. You're right.
Yeah, it's a grind, man.
I couldn't imagine it, man.
No, that's why you don't see it that often. KR says, great shows, Larry. The tight box comments with the hands, hilarious. Pay Belichick, let's effing go. Oh, I was just saying, the tight box thing is like Damon and I are going to do a Monday, Wednesday, Friday show, and I kept going, what's going to be, we're going to make it a real tight. We're going to, instead of having a 2-hour show, it's going to be more like 45 minutes, which we're coming up on 58 minutes right here. Okay. Ono Kai Kala Ono. Belichick has history with Lynch and Shanahan. Yeah, no, I mean, I wouldn't have brought this up if I thought these guys didn't jive together. Belichick respects them. They respect the hell out of him. I mean, that part of it is a done deal.
I mean, he gave him Jimmy Garoppolo a couple years back. Like I said, at the Combine a couple years ago, they were having coffees together. I think Belichick respects the hell out of him, man.
Well, and Shanahan does too. I asked Shanahan a few years ago, I'm like, what's your process film-wise in the week? And he admitted to me that before and I don't know if he still does it, but he admitted to me that before he watches film for his team, that he goes and watches Bill Belichick's defense every week.
Wow.
Because of the rink, because he really feels like he's a cutting-edge defensive mastermind. And obviously Kyle's trying to counter that. And so he takes a look at what Belichick does on defense every single week. The other reason I think people are tired of me talking about Belichick, and I get it.
Love it.
But I will say one last thing. The Niners have 6 or 7 really good young defensive backs. Bill Belichick's kind of known as like maybe the greatest defensive backfield coach of all time. If all he did was come in and get the most out of Hufanga, Jair Brown, Sammy Womack, Ambry Thomas, Demo Lenore, Darrell Luter, you know what I mean? Those 6 DBs. If those 6 DBs all developed into really good players under Belichick, that might be enough to vault the Niners back into the Super Bowl and over the top.
Larry, if he could make Ambry Thomas a Pro Bowler, just make that man a statue. Give him a statue. Give me Belichick, man.
Not only that, I mean, if you look at free agency, the Niners' mode has been they don't sign a lot of free agents. But guess who's a free agent this March? Josh Uche, the excellent edge rusher, who's kind of a lot like Dee Ford for New England, and Kyle Duggar, who you don't know about the health of Hufanga coming into this year. I'd take Belichick and Kyle Duggar right now, and just that would be enough to improve the secondary right there. Blood Moon says Kyle Shanahan needs to revisit that convo with Joe Staley to at least consult or be an assistant O-line coach. Joe has had a few years away, and it's time. Yeah, maybe now. That's a great one, Blood Moon. I think that's a phenomenal comment. Joe has been away from the game enough, and he's had some time with the family and this and that. Maybe he would come back. He would be phenomenal. Ooh. He would be a great assistant O-line coach. Just the passion, the toughness, Mike Nolan says, Larry, are you more of a 4-3-4 guy or a 4-2-5 guy? It's so funny you should ask that. I'm definitely more of a 4-2-5 guy. I like that linebackers on the second level who have lots of speed and cover that entire second level. Yeah. In fact, the one linebacker that I would love to take away from Kansas City is Willie Gay, because Willie Gay is just so fast. Dude, did you see how fast he closed on Purdy in the Super Bowl?
It's like he was a madman. Good,
he's so fast.
Kansas City's defense was so good, man. Holy smoke!
Yeah. McDuffie was spectacular.
The guy's incredible. Holy God!
Yeah. First round pick. I mean, and L'Jarius Sneed was awesome too.
Yeah.
You got to give it to them. Jeff says, Larry, bro, I heard Graham Barton's name, so here. Graham Barton is Duke's offensive lineman. I'm not sure if he's a tackle or a guard. The thing that they say about Graham Barton is he could play all 5 spots on the line. He's really smart. Probably going to be there, though. I would say there's a very good chance that if you like Graham Barton, you could probably pick him off at 31. He'll probably be there. RG says Ron Rivera as Niners defense coordinator. There's something about Ron Rivera that says he's done.
I don't like the guy. I don't know.
He's a great guy. I mean, he went to Cal, but I just don't. I think he's been there, done it. I think so. He seems like he's burnt out by it.
I agree.
Titus Moeller, I'm not tired of you talking about Bill Belichick. I'd like your take on whether you think San Francisco will actually draft Brendan Rice. That's a pick I seriously want. What do you think, Raj? First of all, have you done anything with Jerry as far as, I don't know, have you ever had any brushes with, I know you do a lot of stuff with Niner people. Have you ever talked to Jerry at all?
I've done Joe Montana recently. Actually, he was part of the thing we did over the Vegas time, our Hard Rock stuff. I did Jerry. I did meet Jerry one time. We did a little promotional thing with Jerry. He's a man. He's awesome. He's like the best Niner ambassador of all the former players. This guy is like a true, he's like a fan, like me, and this guy is amazing. Jerry Rice is great. He's a great person. It was a blessing to meet him. I love the guy.
Yeah, I'm a big Jerry fan, and I'm always skeptical of sons of great players, because they're usually pushed up higher than maybe they belong because of their dad. But then when I watched Brendan Rice at USC, it's like I fell in love with this kid's potential. I mean, he is 6'4", 210 pounds. Now I'm eager to see what he runs in Indy, because I don't think he's going to run particularly fast. But there's only one Jerry. But man, when you watch Brendan play, he plays the game to win. And he's a very great competitor. He's a serious football player. He's got great ball skills. He runs really good routes. I love him. I think he's probably going to be a late 3rd to early 4th round pick. So late day 2, maybe early day 3. But if I had a pick in that part of the draft, I really like him. Now, a lot of people are talking about McCaffrey's brother, Luke McCaffrey, and he had a really good year. He's only played 1 year of football. And he played for Rice this year, and he was all conference, and I'm eager to see what he runs too. I know Christian badly wants to play with him. I talked to Christian about it in the locker room 2 months ago or so. But Luke McCaffrey to me, and I've watched both these guys, Luke and Steve and Brandon Rice. Brandon Rice to me looks more NFL. Luke McCaffrey looks, now I don't know what he's going to run. Christian says he's fast, but I don't see it necessarily. Like when I'm watching him, I see like just ordinary speed. So I'm thinking, more like a 6th round pick, maybe a 7th round pick. We'll see what he runs, because that will be the big determining factor. But all conference receiver, and he definitely's got ball skills, and he definitely plays the game hard, and I'd have interest in having him on my team. But I don't, if you can't talk about, like, Brendan Rice would be like a guy that you might be able to throw in with Juwan Jennings and maybe a free agent if you traded Aiyuk and reasonably replace him. I don't think Luke McCaffrey can replace Aiyuk in any way, shape, or form.
It'd be fun. I saw someone tweet the other day. I can't remember. This was my favorite tweet so far of draft season. He goes, this is my first and only mock draft. He goes, I'm drafting Brendan Rice, Luke McCaffrey, Frank Gore Jr. That's it for the culture. I was like, oh, but go get me Frank Gore Jr. Go get me Luke McCaffrey. Give me Brendan Rice, just because for the culture.
I'd be happy with all those guys. I really would. I love Frank Gore Jr. Bro, have you seen Frank Gore Jr.?
Yes, he runs just like Frank Gore.
Like
crazy. Yes, get me Frank Gore Jr. for the culture.
Yeah. He in the Shrine game, they ran him through the B gap on a first quarter run, and he was gone. And it was just like Frank. Frank has those really subtle but awesome cuts inside, and he cuts full speed, and then he's gone. Frank Gore Jr. cut full speed and was gone. Yeah. Now, I don't know what he's going to run, but I would say, judging from what I saw, I would say he's like 4.4, 5, something like that. He's definitely got some scoot, and he's got some power. And heck, I'll say this, man, just on what Frank Gore was. I mean, Frank Gore tore both ACLs at the University of Miami and played forever in the NFL and was damn good and had all this heart. If his kid, and Frank was on the sideline for the East-West Shrine, and he was, almost like Frank Gore Jr. gave him a couple looks like, I hate you. Like, he's really coaching his kid. Yeah. Frank is in the ear of his kid like this, just, and you could see his kid kind of not liking it. And Frank's obviously in the Niner organization, but I would love to have Frank Gore Jr. as if the Niners could add one running back. Think about it. They don't need a running back. They got Mason, they got Mitchell, they got CMC, they got Juice right now, unless they trade him or cut him or restructure him or whatever. But if they're going to do anything in the backfield, it's going to be a day 3 pick late in the draft or after the draft. Frank Gore, from what I can tell, all the mocks I'm looking at, he's there in the 6th round, 7th round. So, that would be a great 7th round pick.
I think
great
so.
7th round
pick. Frank's in the front office. Frank, I'm pretty sure he's going to hardcore press John Lynch and say, draft my son. You know how many days he's going to wake up every day, send him a text message, make sure you draft my son. And I would probably put money that during this draft, we're going to see Frank Gore Jr. on the 49ers. I really think it's going to happen. I don't know why. I really do.
All right, last quick topic, and then we'll bolt. Ty Davis Price went to the Eagles today. He was a 3rd round pick at LSU. And he finished. They kind of screwed with the roster to get Logan Ryan on the roster, and they waived him practice squad. TDP is interesting because he's got talent, and John Lynch said he's a really hard worker, and he had some impressive runs in camp where he's running over his pads and he looks really powerful. But Raj, it just didn't happen. Do you think TDP? Sermon went to the Eagles, it didn't work out. Do you think TDP is going to find himself in the NFL? What do you think?
I hope he does, man. But it's just another bad 3rd round running back pick, and I can't have Kyle do it again. Like, that's why I hope
no more.
Or Junior, because he'd be a late round pick. Kyle does great with the late round picks, undrafted running back. We've seen so many of them. But Jordan Mason, Elijah Mitchell, Matt Breida, et cetera, et cetera. Please, Kyle, don't take another 3rd round draft pick. I feel bad for him because TDP has some talent. But I think at the time, even when he was drafted, I never thought he was a 3rd round prospect. I never thought he was that high. I didn't have him that high. I was surprised. But at the same time, I did see some good film, and I was like, okay, I can see what Kyle saw. But from what I understand, I just don't think he worked hard enough. He was a little slow for the system. I don't think he was good with the blitz pickups, although during training camp, he did run hard this year when I noticed him compared to last year. But I just don't know if he had enough like blocking abilities, and that's what Kyle wants. You have to block, or you're not going to make it on Kyle Shanahan's team. No block, no rock. I hope he succeeds wherever he's at. Right now, Philly, who knows if he makes the team? It was a futures reserve contract. I don't know. I hope he does good. But Trey Sermon, if he follows the Trey Sermon path, he's not going to end up doing anything.
The bigger issue for me, Raj, last point I'll make here, but I just don't – the Niners have to – we all this talk about what they need to do to, climb to the top of the mountain. They got to start hitting on their day 1 and day 2 draft picks. Mike McGlinchey, bust. Reuben Foster, bust. Solomon Thomas, bust. And then you look at these in the last 3 years, they've drafted 9 players in the second and third rounds. The only good players out of there right now for sure are Aaron Banks and Jair Brown. There's 7 guys that are either misses or to be determined. Trey Sermon, Drake Jackson. I love Drake Jackson, but so far hasn't happened. Danny Gray. I really like Danny Gray. So far it hasn't happened. TDP, Cam Latu, Jake Moody did hit a 50-yarder in the field in the Super Bowl, but I'm not sure about him. Ambry Thomas. I mean, so you got 9 picks in the last 3 drafts in the second and third round, and you've got Banks and Jair Brown and 7 either misses or kind of like, I don't know.
You're right. They got to hit. The last time they really hit and made a superstar in the second round was Deebo Samuel. He was a second-round pick. And then they messed that up. After that, they went Jalen Hurts. I can sit here and talk about that whole draft for days. And the only other, we talked about this earlier when we talked about receivers. If we want to keep it real, first-round receivers in the 49ers, that's why I'm a little sketched out if they do this, because the last receiver that was actually good that they took in the first round was actually Brandon Aiyuk, who they traded up to get. But before that, they struck out. The 49ers organization in a whole just could not draft a first-round wide receiver to save their life. T.O. was the last time they had a good, draft pick as receiver. After that, Mike Jenkins, oh my God, Rashawn Woods, so many bad receivers.
So many bad ones.
Brandon Aiyuk was the last good first-round receiver. Just don't trade him. That's my final thought, Larry. Do not trade Brandon Aiyuk. Please don't do it.
I know. Shanahan was, cheering that pick. It was during the, wasn't it during the pandemic?
He was going, oh my God, let's go. He was
I love that draft when Belichick was sitting there and he had his dog at the table and Shanahan sitting there with his kids. His little girls are right there. They're all high-fiving. Brandon Aiyuk. Good stuff. D-Loose is Dante Pettis. Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
Rounder.
If a guy has blue hair and is slow, don't draft him. Driver 8, they could have drafted Sean Dawkins. I did an interview with Sean Dawkins on KMBR years ago, and he was all fired up, and I'm like, tell us about Sean Dawkins. And he's like, and he wanted to say that he wanted to play for the Niners, but he didn't want to say directly, I want to play for the Niners. So guess how he said it, Raj?
How did he say it?
He goes, Sean Dawkins just wants to be on grass. That's what he said. We used that highlight for 6 months after that.
Yeah.
And of course, he meant grass over AstroTurf. All right, Raj, what do you got cooking the rest of the week? You got anything special going on the channel? I know is the off season busier for you than the regular season? Because the regular season, there's a rhythm to it. You kind of know when the decisions, for the most part. I mean, there'll be some surprises. The off season though is a total crapshoot. At any hour of any day, morning, noon, night, there could be some signing, firing, cut, trade. So does that change? I mean, you are all, for people who don't know Raj is all over the Instagram I'll go to IG if I'm out of the loop and I need a quick, let's get in the loop. I'll be honest, I'll go to your IG and just see what you've posted for the last 7 hours. And, 9 times out of 10, if I do a video, it's going to be, Raj had this in the last half hour. So I'm always kind of, checking out your stuff. But is the off season harder for you, or is the regular season harder?
Oh man, they're both hard. Regular season's so hard because there's so much, and I have a 9 to 5, so it's hard to like keep up. But the off season's a grind too because some stuff happens just out of the blue, and you're like, crap, and then you just have to like drop everything you're doing, and you could be driving somewhere, and news breaks. But like I know, doing this for so many years now, covering the team and everything, you kind of know when certain things are going to happen, like certain weeks, combine week, free agency week. Like I set aside time, like I take time off. I use my PTO and stuff to be home so I can cover it. But then there's like surprise things. But like this week, we're probably going to get a DC move, and I'm going to have to kind of navigate around that. But it is hard in a different way. But I try to make like chunks of time set aside to do those things with working around my schedule from work. Like the draft, I'll take a couple of days off, so I'm home to cover that. But yeah,
okay, so I'm one of your patients.
Yeah.
Do you go in the home, or are you in a clinic somewhere?
I do both. I go into.
Okay, so you come to my house. I got a bum shoulder. I'm laying there on the table, and all of a sudden you get this bzz, bzz, bzz. The 49ers have just hired Bill Belichick as defensive coordinator. What do you do? Do you go with the rub down and Belichick later, or do you say, excuse me?
Real quick, I got to fired out breaking news. 49ers have just hired Bill Belichick. After I see the patient, I get in my car. Breaking news, guys, did you see Bill Belichick? Bro, that comes first. That's why at work this week, people are like, you're really working hard this week. Roger's like, there's no man, there's nothing. I'm like fiending on my phone. They're like, and then they know, like one of my coworkers just like, bro, you haven't posted. What's going on? What's the news? I was like, there's nothing going on. I'm sick to my stomach. So yeah, no, I take the Niner news pretty seriously.
Oh my God. Driver 8 says Bob Kraft rub down. No, come on. Get your mind out of the gutter. All right. That's going to do it. Hey, thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krueger Show. Thanks to Marin Auto Glass. Check them out. MarinAutoGlass.com, 415-883-3030. Underdog Fantasy. Check the link in the description. Use that promo code Krug. And then we got 2 new sponsors this month. Sharp Corners, Sports Cards and Collectibles. Give Anthony Catania a call at 831-521-5264. And if you need a roofer, the only roofer I'll use is valleyhillroofing.net. Give them a call, 209-481-6851. They're a Go Green contractor, and all their website links are listed in the description of the show. Raj, great stuff as usual, my man. We'll talk next week, hopefully. We'll keep this going throughout the offseason and chop it up because something tells me that there's going to be a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I think so.
Don't you get the feeling?
I think so.
The Niners, never boring. Never boring.
Almost. Yeah.
Raj, good to see you. Thanks to everybody. Thanks for all the supers. Peace.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of.